Have not fans, as of right now, this will be the last video on my mini series Missing in Action, unless there are comments in the comment section below that point out characters that I didn't cover in my video. So far we've done Celine, Tony, Michael, and the character who's going to be the subject of this video is going to be Byron. Now, if you don't remember Byron, I don't blame you. We haven't seen him since episode 1 of season 3. He was the private investigator or detective that Jim Cryer hired to kind of tail Hanna to see if she's going to snitch on Wyatt to the police. Remember, at the end of season 1, we found out that Wyatt went to the crack house, gotten beaten up, and then came back to the Cryer house. And in the kitchen, he told his parents, like, I don't know what happened. I think I killed a guy. I hit him with the car, and he was laying out in the street, and I don't know what happened. Hanna was in there, but then Jim yelled at her to get out. Now, Jim remembered that Hanna heard what Wyatt said and pretty much wanted to know whether or not she would go to the police about it. At the time, if I'm not mistaken, he didn't know that it was Benny, you know, Hanna's son, until later on. Now, I'm thinking that when it comes down to it, that's, you know, well, honestly, not what I think, that what I know. That was the reason Jim hired Byron to come out, you know, and pretty much, I guess you could say, look out for Hanna when really he was looking out for himself. Now, at first, I think even Byron says that at first, you know, I treated this as a job to see if you would tell on, you know, Wyatt to the cops and get him arrested. That was my job by Jim Cryer, but along the way, I actually developed feelings. And you can actually see that at first it seemed like, you know, it was really all business for Byron. And if I'm not mistaken, Hanna pretty much called out Byron on his bull crap, like Candace called out Oscar on his bull crap, when he literally, you know, this suave debonair guy at the Sarandon Hotel bar kept approaching her about having sex, but she just knew something wasn't right. She eventually opened up to him, and then it turns out he had been screwing her over the whole time. Same thing with Hanna and Byron. You know, she didn't know what to expect. She didn't trust him. Well, honestly, I believe she said she didn't trust anybody, which, given the details, makes a lot of sense, given the fact that her friend Celine had turned her back on her after, you know, thinking that she was trying to get with Jim. The son of her friend Catherine hit her son in a hit and run incident, but her friend Catherine wouldn't admit to it. And of course, you know, everything else in her life seemed to be falling apart. So it makes sense as to why Hanna wouldn't trust anybody, especially with sensitive details in regards to his case. Byron pretty much presented himself as somebody who was trying to help out. You know, he worked with the law. He was trying to figure out who did the hit and run incident. And one of the biggest things I'll give Hanna credit for is the fact that, look, I think I know who did it, but I need to figure out more evidence on this because I'm not 100% sure, and I don't want to open my mouth unless I'm, again, 100% sure that they're guilty. And just like with Candace and Oscar, after eventually warming up and opening up to Byron about her past, she found out that Byron was literally, you know, two-timing her the entire time. I'm not going to lie, up until the point that I was writing down the notes for this video, I never even thought that there was a similar Candace and Hanna story arc going on. That's pretty cool when you think about it. That's pretty cool, because remember that those two fell for men who were their have-nots. They fell for men who were hired by haves in order to expel information from them. You know, Oscar was hired by David to get the money back for Jim that Candace extorted. Byron was hired by Jim to get the information from Hanna in regards to Wyatt. That's pretty cool when you think about it. Now, when it comes to Byron, you know, and again, don't know if it's 100% true, but he said his wife was murdered, and now he's a widower, and he doesn't have any kids. And he really felt that, you know, the situation with the hit and run incident with Benny resonated with his wife's murder. So that's why he felt, you know, called to help out Hanna with this case, because he's experienced firsthand how rough it can be. If I'm not mistaken, we never truly learn if that's a true or false statement on his part on that story. But there are two reasons that I wanted to do this video on Byron. Because a lot of fans think that, you know, he's been written off the show for good. He's gone. It would not surprise me if he's gone, because and again, a couple things I want to say about him, but number one, the reason I wanted Byron to come back, or I thought he would be coming back, had to do with Quincy Jr. Because during the time where, Hanna eventually trusted him in terms of, Hanna always took the bus everywhere. And Byron was like, look, it looks like rain is about to come. I want to give you a ride, to your house. You've been at the hospital all day. I know you're hungry, you're tired. I'll come pick you up so you can come back in the morning. Hanna eventually accepted his ride. During that time, she said, you know what, aside from the hit and run incident, there's something else I want you to look into if you can. It has to do with my grandson, Quincy Jr., Quincy Maxwell. And Byron said that he would try to help her out with that. Now, this was before, of course, Hanna eventually started to have feelings. And, I believe they hugged at one point after figuring out that, Benny was actually still breathing and he was coming to. And it looked like they were about to kiss, but they didn't. But you could tell that Hanna was, developing feelings for this guy. And then the final episode that those two actually talked, not the whole him coming to the party and then being told to leave. It was when Hanna called Byron to invite him to the welcome home party for Benny. At the time, Jim was telling Byron, hey, good job. You got the information I needed. You're good. You're free to go. Well, free to go in the sense that, hey, your job that I hired you for is now over. Thanks. Good work. Goodbye. It's like you don't have to see Hanna anymore. And then Byron's like, oh, really? And then Jim figured out, wait, you like her, don't you? Basically, you did your job, but along the way, you started to have feelings for her. Now you want to see her again. No. I hired you to get the information from Hanna or, pretty much shadow her. Don't deal with her anymore. Matter of fact, at that very moment, Hanna calls, invites him to the party saying that, oh, I'm sorry, I got work to do. I can't come. That's when Celine comes to the front door to tell Jim something. And then Jim's like, get back in the house. And that's when Hanna put two and two together. It's like, oh, so you're working with Jim Cryer, huh? He's like, oh, no, well, I can come to the party. Don't show up, and hung up on him. Then Byron shows up with a case of beers. Hannah's like, you know what? You liar. You're two-faced. Get out of here. I don't want to see you again. Byron, took the pack of beers, put them on the table gently, looked towards, the direction Hanna was walking, and then left. We never seen him again. Now, the reason I wanted Byron to show back up, or I thought he was going to show up, because I thought he would actually have a role in figuring out where Hanna's grandson was. And by doing so, it would redeem his character and possibly get him back into Hanna's heart. That was my opinion in theory on how Byron could come back into the show. However, that wasn't the case. Eventually, after a long time, actually, and a lot of plotting by Benny, he eventually found out that Quincy Jr. was, being, I wouldn't even say being taken care of, but was in the care, if quotation marks, of Quita Maxwell, which was Quincy's sister, and being abused physically by, the experience. I thought that would have been a great way to reintroduce Byron back into the series again, to maybe not fully get Hanna's forgiveness, but I feel like if there was any kind of gesture that he could present to Hanna in order to say, hey, I'm sorry, that would have been it. That would have been it. Basically taking advantage of her grief and getting close to her with her son in the hospital. He could have found her missing grandson. I feel like that would have been a great way to redeem his character and put him back in the show. However, that's not the case. So I feel like due to the fact that Quincy Jr. was found and then sadly killed off, I don't think Byron has any apparent reason of coming back into the show. He is missing in action. I did want to see him back in the show, but honestly, I can't even figure out a viable reason for him to show up at this point. Now, moving on to point number 2, because I said there were a couple things I wanted to talk about with Byron. Another thing I wanted to bring up is the fact that in relation to the Michael video, remember that during the time that, Benny was in a coma, Byron was shadowing Hanna in order to see whether or not she was going to make a move to call the cops. Michael was actually in the picture as well. Basically, Hanna was helping him grieve, as well as, Michael was trying to get justice. And I believe at one point, Michael, Byron, and Hanna were all at Hanna's house talking over the fact that, Wyatt was the one that hit Benny and little Lizzie. I believe this was after Hanna went to the cops and then said, hey, I know who hit my son and little Lizzie. Wyatt got arrested. And then I believe at that time, the main reason that Jim hired Byron was, look, let me know if Hanna makes a move because I have a plan. it wasn't Norman Hewins, I believe, the guy who looked like Wyatt and took the fall for him. There was another guy before him. His name escapes me. It was the guy who was at the campaign office that Jim and David had at the time. They literally go to the front door of the campaign office, and then he explains the story about, look, my son did hit somebody, but he didn't press charges. That was the cover story. However, Hanna knew that that was not the case. So as soon as Hanna made the move to call the cops about Wyatt being arrested, that's when Jim made his move and said, look, the DNA, I got the car to prove it right there. If my son was the one to hit little Lizzie and hit Benny Young and leave him out in the street, I promise you I would take him to jail myself. So I feel that Michael at the time, he was actually trying to get close to Hanna. If I'm not mistaken, there was a point where, you know, those two embracing each other. Michael was going in for a kiss, but Hannah's like, whoa, 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 slow down now. Basically pushing away the guy who was generally a good guy and cared about Hanna. He was being pushed away in favor of Byron, who turned out to be Two-Face. So in a way, you know, Hanna pretty much screwed herself right there. So that's why I feel like that even, you know, dug the knife in even further, because at that point, Byron was the one that she had eyes for while Michael was being pushed aside. Flip the script to season 3, after kicking Byron out of the party, you know, Michael and stayed the night in Hannah's room because he was drunk. And then the next morning, you know, she came in and those two were getting it on. So I'm just saying right there, I feel that Byron's time to shine has passed, sadly. I feel like it would have been a great way to reintroduce his character if he indeed helped out with the whole, you know, finding Quincy Jr. So, you know, just a character that a lot of people have forgotten about. Again, it would not surprise me if the name Byron doesn't ring a bell. So with that being said, you know, do you feel like I'm correct in the fact that Byron is pretty much written off the show? He's gone for good just because his pinnacle and time to shine would have involved the finding of Hannah's grandson's location. Do you think that Byron or Michael is the better match for Hanna? And again, as I said at the beginning, subscribe if you haven't done so already, and let me know in the comment section below. Aside from Celine, Tony, Michael, and Byron, are there any other characters who are missing in action that you would like me to do a video on?